Thank you very much for coming.
Yes, good morning, and I'm very pleased to stand here in front of you this morning, and thank you for getting up early today. Normally in my daily work as a corporate and editorial photographer, I'm more used to be invisible and to try to get into the scene, taking my photographs and not standing on the stage. So it's a quite new feeling today. A couple of 10 days ago, I got the email from Claudia asking me to doing a presentation here and challenging me to talk about justice. And that's quite big topic. So I would like to take you with me on a journey and raising some questions about justice, which I met through my work, but also through my personal history. Justice, it's such a huge word and such a huge topic. So where to start? Because these topics of justice were raised through centuries and cultures, and as long as people exist, there were discussions about how to organize a society in a just way. So I start in the very easy way, in the family, the justice between the brothers and sisters about who is getting the most attention, to the question who is doing the housework, or if you are in the public, who is cleaning after you. Is that just? How does countries work together? Are they cooperating, or are they doing their national interests? That's actually the ringing bell outside the White House in Washington, D.C. And then, how mobile is the society? How easy is it for people from a lower level to get onto the higher level? And nevertheless, how to enforce the law, and who has to enforce the law, and what are they doing when they don't agree with the decisions of the lawmakers? Like in this case, where this policewoman has to protect nuclear waste transports in Germany. And then the living conditions around the world. The environmental footprints, are they distributed and shared by a just way? And nevertheless, all the products we use, do we know about how they are produced? The Macs, the iPhones we use, is that just? And our wealth in Norway, where does it come from? It's from the oil and gas export in the first place. And last week, Norway blamed Brazil for burning rainforests. At the same time, they signed a trade agreement with Brazil. Is that just? I think all these are overwhelming questions, and I think the only thing we can agree upon is that the world is not just, maybe also illustrated by this picture behind me. When I was asked to give this presentation, I had to think about Bob Dylan's song Hurricane. It's a story, the true story of a boxer who was sentenced to lifelong prison for a murder that he obviously didn't committed. And at the end of the song, Bob Dylan is singing he feels ashamed to live in a country where justice is a game. But what does it mean, justice is a game? If we widen our view, a lot of the world and the topic of justice reminds me of a game. It's the questions where we are born, our parents, our family, the country, and the political system we are living in, and how it influences our position in society and the world we are living in. So it's a lot of lucky and unlucky coincidences which decides which role we have to play in this game, life. On the 13th of August 1961, 10 years before I was born, the Eastern German government decided to build a wall in Berlin to divide the eastern part from the western part. At this time, my father was living in the eastern part of Germany, studying there. But at that very day, he was on a party on the western side of the city. And when he wanted to go back early in the morning, the 13th of August, he saw the construction work of the wall that should be built. And he decided then and then to stay in the West, which meaning leaving his family and his friends behind him. He got contact to someone who could falsify passports. And so they did and helped some friends over the border. One of them was caught by the Eastern German police, and he had to reveal who helped him. As a result, my father was it was a just case in the Eastern Germany, and he could never cross the border again because then he should be arrested. Then he moved to Frankfurt, where I met my mother, and here I am, in a way, a result of this very unjust, political unjust project of dividing a country, dividing a city. By coincidences, it came that I'm standing here. So in that way, I'm in a way grateful to the Berlin Wall, because otherwise my parents hadn't met. My now 11-year-old daughter came home from school a couple of months ago and was saying, oh yes, we were talking about justice, and I was telling about my grandfather that he was a criminal because he falsified passports. And I was a bit, wow, I have never seen him like this. And then we had a discussion about how complicated it can be, that it can be right to do something which is against the law, to do something good. But do we accept that this world is not just? Or are there ways to struggle? How can we struggle for a better just world, where more people are treated fair, where we can trust the law, for a world where our environmental footprints are equally accounted on the globe? But how to achieve it? Just as old as I am is the theory, the veil of ignorance. It's by the philosopher John Rawls in 1971, and it is a thought experiment. Imagine that you don't know anything about you and your role and place in society, and neither of the position of all the others in the society. In a way, if you're behind this veil of ignorance, and then getting the task to establish a just system in a certain area or field. And since you don't know where you are and who will profit and who will lose, the result will be just. That's the theory. Because the veil of ignorance prevents us from knowing who will benefit and who needs to share some of his privileges. But in our world, in our real life, we know our privileges, and in addition assume that they are in a way just because our neighbors and colleagues are in a way more or less have the same standard of living and the same rights. But we know that maybe they aren't. So let's move on to a journey through some cases of bad games and good games related to justice. Obviously, a very bad game is the blood feud in Albania. I was visiting this family, Paul on the picture, who was living in this house, and this house is the interior, for 7 years with his brothers and with his brother and his parents. And he was living inside the house, means he was living inside the house, because on the outside the death was waiting. Why? His uncle was involved in a murder case, and according to the medieval Kanun law, the deed asked for revenge, blood feud. But not the uncle, but the nephews, Paul and his brother Seth. One day the garbage collectors came and needed some change, and Seth went out and was shot by the daughters of the other family at this very corner. After that happened, Paul had to stay inside for another couple of years, but at this time, a nun was trying to get these two families together, trying that they used the veil of ignorance and saw their situation and understood that they could all win when saying goodbye to blood feud, and not to be friends, but to accept that there is a system of law in that country as well, which can handle these cases. But another 590 families in Albania still are affected by blood feud today, at least numbers from 2018. Some hundreds kilometers north of Skodra, which was the town of Albania, in the mid-90s, the international community moved to Mostar to rebuild the city. It were the best intentions of a good game, to recover the city after years of war between the Croats on the one side and the Bosnians on the other side of the river, which divided the town. But at the same time, the international community, the military, the UN organizations, the NGOs, created unjust on the ground through unintended side effects. While I was studying political science, I wrote my master thesis on this issue. Just one example. In the eastern part, most of the houses were destroyed, and now the NGOs and UN organizations came to this place to recover the city, but they needed places to stay. So those who had not a destroyed house rented it out to the UN organizations or the NGOs, because they could earn more money by renting out to the international community than to rent it out to their neighbors with a destroyed house. And as a result of this, the social injustice wasn't solved, but increased in the years after the war. But now let's move on to Norway. In Norway, we are living in a, I would say, very good game. We have a stable political system where compromise, mediation, and negotiation with other countries is highly rated, where the legal justice was challenged and tested by the events of the 22nd of July. Where people with disabilities are unable to take part in the society. There's around 75% of the inhabitants of the country own their own houses and flats. But the share of the lowest quarter of income, the share is decreasing for decades. What does that say about justice in Norway? And then we have a stable system with elderly care and health system, where people with dementia can live places which always like at home. But the Norwegian playground interacts with other play games and depends on them. As we all know, people are forced by different reasons to leave their home, and some make it to Norway. One day I got the phone call from the Norwegian Foreigners Police. We're asking, is it Ilja Hendel on the phone? Being European citizen, married to a Norwegian, I felt quite safe living in Norway. But suddenly I got this feeling and understanding how it can be if you're not sure about your legal status and your legal rights to stay. Luckily for me, it was a job inquiry and not a call for sending me back to Germany. I was asked if I could take some press pictures from the immigration and also deportation procedures. I had to think twice, but since I was asked to visit Trondheim, the prison-like last stop for expatriation, and the task was that I should document what's going on there, I agreed. My red line was not to take pictures that were staged, not to make it look nicer than it was, In the end, the police was happy with his pictures, and I as well, since we both saw different things in it. And actually, I gave some of the royalty to NOAS, which is an organization which provides legal help to asylum seekers. At Trandum, I met people, their only fault was to hope and invest quite a lot for a better life in Norway. Not all of them, but many. And there I met the boundaries of the Norwegian game set. Some years before, and that was actually the reason why I was called by the police to do the job in Bastrop, I visited Bastrop, in Trandum, I visited Bastrop Prison Island, which is quite an idyllic island in the Oslo Fjord, and very contrary to Trandum, where I met people with real criminal background. What a contrast. The idea of Bastrop, of this game of justice there, is to prepare the inmates for their civil life after years in prison for serious crimes. They are living in houses, go to work, doing ecological agriculture. They have an own supermarket, actually the only one in Norway which doesn't have surveillance cameras. And one day, one afternoon, I was standing beside the guy who was preparing food for lunch in his kitchen using this big knife. And then after some small talk, you always get to the point where the question rises, okay, why are you here? Homicide and affection. It's a very strange feeling to stand beside someone who did kill someone in affection using a big knife and not knowing what triggered the affection the first time. But that's more the funny side of it. The life on Bastrop is challenging. After years in prison, it's difficult to take responsibility for their own lives again and to live in a society together with others. I met another guy, and he didn't dare to stay on Bastrop. He was stressed about his responsibility for his own life. He was triggered by all the opportunities to escape from this place, to call a friend to deliver some drugs, or using the surfboard was standing in the one house close to the sea. And afterwards someone actually used it to escape from the island, but it's very seldom that it happened. And he asked for permission to get back to the normal prison with his rules and routines, because he felt like being a bad player in a good game Bastrop. But why I'm talking about Bastrop now? The topic is justice we are talking about today. And I was talking about the veil of ignorance of role. And when you're visiting a prison, you know that you're visiting the real bad guys. So, but should you treat them like this? Good morning, nice to meet you. It was the first time this guy who wanted to go back to the normal prison heard these words in a prison, both from other inmates and from the director. And that's in a way the spirit of that place. The director actually welcomes every single inmate with saying hello, viewing him through the veil of ignorance, not asking for the crime they had committed, but welcoming them with respect, regardless of where they come from. And actually expecting the respect the other way around. When I was sitting on my train back to Oslo after the visits on Bastrop, I suddenly recognized that I was looking on the people in the train and was asking myself which crimes they had committed. Not expecting that they did, but yeah, you can't see it. So these visits to Bastrop were in a way an eye-opener to me. An eye-opener which I tried to implement into my private and professional behavior, meeting people with the same respect. The same if it's a prison inmate, a worker in the field, the CEO of a global company, just showing respect. So the world is not just, as we stated in the beginning, but should we accept it? We should struggle for a more justice world, like we should struggle for global peace and a sustainable world. Even these aims are long, far from now. But we can try to make the game better and to influence it when we make decisions. To see the challenges we meet through the veil of ignorance, just to find a just solution. Even though we have to accept a disadvantage for ourselves by making these just decisions. And meet people with respect, always. That could be a starting point. Thank you.
We have some time for some questions. Would you like to make them? I would like, actually, so when you are in these situations that you have to portray this kind of vulnerable, you meet people there in the vulnerable places. How do you make this connection with a person that is in front of you, and you are photographing them in a very vulnerable, very sad, sometimes violent crimes? Are people open to you? Do you have to? How do you make them comfortable in this uncomfortable situation?
I think I try, as I said in the end, to showing respect to them, and to just say hello, look in the eyes, taking them, see them, and I think that's in a way all of us wanted to be seen. We all want to be seen, and it's the same if it's a person in a vulnerable situation or a person in a powerful situation. So it's the same when I'm taking portraits of CEOs or politicians. I always ask to be alone with this person, to be just two humans meeting each other, and without the hierarchy and without the role we are in. Because then I can say hi, okay, and don't think that you're the foreign minister or have a certain position. And then I think it's important, and that's also influenced by a photographer I admire a lot, James Nachtwey. And when he is doing war photography, and when he is walking through these horrible places and meeting people in extreme situation, he's always like this. May I take some pictures? Thank you, thank you. Silent, not disturbing, and showing respect to the people he's meeting. And that's something I try to implement in my daily work, even if it's for a corporate annual report in the headquarters of a company, or if it's with some inmates in a prison.
So I'd like to thank you so much for coming today, and it was a great talk about justice. So hopefully I think everyone can take some takeaways with respecting each other more. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys for coming as well. And don't forget to get your free week passes with Manuela, and have a great Friday. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.